The doors to the luxurious office opened with a soft creak. Sarah stepped inside, her heart racing as she looked at Leo Harris, the billionaire who had just changed her life forever. She had no choice but to accept the proposal that had been handed to her, a marriage built on nothing more than a contract. A year of her life in exchange for financial security, for her sick mother, and a way out of the daily struggle. Leo didn't even look up when she walked in. His gaze was fixed on the window, the weight of his business empire on his shoulders. When he finally spoke, his voice was as cold as the polished marble beneath their feet. "Sit down." Sarah hesitated, then took a seat across from him. She noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the weariness that he tried so hard to hide. Leo didn't need to say much. His offer was clear: marry him for a year, play the part of his wife, and he would provide everything she needed. Money. Stability. Her family would never have to worry again. But in return, she would have to live with a man who was more interested in his empire than in love. "Sign this, and everything will be taken care of," he said, sliding a contract across the table. Sarah stared at the paper, her fingers tracing the edges. She'd never dreamed of a life like this. But then again, she never imagined being so desperate. After a long breath, she signed it. It was the wedding day. The opulence of the ceremony was breathtaking. The guests, the flowers, the lights, it all felt like a dream. But Sarah, in her beautiful gown, couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider in a world she didn't belong to. Leo stood at the altar as cold as ever. No smile, no excitement, just the blank stare of a man fulfilling a duty. When they exchanged rings, Sarah felt the weight of the situation more than ever. This wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction. As the ceremony ended, Sarah followed Leo down the aisle. She didn't look at the guests, didn't care about the whispers. Her thoughts were on the contract, her ticket out of the chaos of her life, even if it meant being alone in this new one. But as the last notes of the wedding march echoed through the venue, something shifted. A woman entered. A woman who had no place at this wedding, but somehow, she commanded the room. Elena. Sarah froze. She had heard the name before, Leo's first love. But why was she here? Why now, of all times? Leo's eyes went soft when he saw her. He didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. It was clear. Elena wasn't just some past lover, she was someone Leo had never truly let go of. Sarah's stomach churned as she tried to focus on the rest of the ceremony. She pushed back the wave of jealousy rising inside her. She was just here for the money. This was a business deal. Nothing more. But she could already feel the cracks in her resolve forming. The honeymoon suite was grand, its walls adorned with delicate paintings and plush furniture. Sarah stood near the window, watching the city lights flicker below. She had imagined this moment would feel different. There should have been joy, but all she felt was confusion. Leo stood by the door, a cold distance between them. After a long silence, he turned to face her. The phone in his hand buzzed, but it was only when the name Elena flashed across the screen that everything seemed to freeze. "Leo, who was that?" Sarah asked, trying to hide the knot of dread forming in her stomach. "It's Elena," he said, his voice clipped. "We need to talk." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She didn't know why it bothered her so much, but it did. He stepped away to answer the call, and Sarah's mind raced. Why didn't he tell me about her before? Leo's voice dropped, almost like a whisper. "I didn't think you needed to know." The door opened again, and Leo hung up. He turned to Sarah, his expression tense, like a man on the edge of something he didn't want to face. "Sarah," he began, "there's something you need to know. Elena, she's pregnant. And the baby, it's mine." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She couldn't breathe for a moment. Her hands shook, her mind racing to understand the weight of his confession. The next morning, the tension in the house was unbearable. Sarah tried to avoid Leo, but the moment they crossed paths in the hallway, she couldn't hold back. "You never told me about Elena," she said, her voice cracking. "You kept her a secret. Why?" Leo looked away, his jaw tight. "It's complicated," he said. "She was my first love. She left me and I moved on. But now she's back and she's carrying my child." Sarah's heart broke. This wasn't just about a contract anymore. This was about real love, about regret and choices Leo had made long before she entered his life. She was just a placeholder, a lifeline for his problems. But she deserved more than that. Days passed, and Elena wasn't going anywhere. She showed up at the mansion unannounced, her eyes sharp, demanding to speak with Leo. The tension between the three of them was undeniable, and Sarah could feel the growing distance. Elena was confident. She was used to getting what she wanted. Sarah had reached her breaking point. She couldn't stay in a marriage that wasn't real. She couldn't be a part of Leo's world, always second to Elena. One night, after another heated confrontation, Sarah stood in the living room, facing Leo. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady but filled with pain. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not your second choice, Leo. You need to make a decision. You need to figure out who you want." Leo reached for her, his hand trembling. "Sarah, please don't go," he begged. "I don't know what I want, but I don't want to lose you." But Sarah was already walking toward the door. "Then you should have chosen me. But you didn't." As Sarah walked out of the mansion, she didn't look back. The city lights sparkled, but they no longer felt like a promise. They felt like a reminder of everything she had walked away from. And as Leo stood at the window watching her leave, he knew, deep down, that it was too late. The sound of footsteps echoed in the empty mansion as Leo walked through the grand hallway. His fingers brushed the edges of the contract that still lay on his desk, Sarah's signature still fresh in his mind. He had thought losing her would be easy, that it would be just another obstacle to overcome. But the emptiness inside him told a different story. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, something he had lost forever. His phone buzzed again, and he glanced down at the screen. Elena's name flashed in bold letters. Leo didn't hesitate. "Elena," he muttered as he answered the call, his voice tight. "What is it?" Elena's voice was as cold as the marble floors beneath him. "You still thinking about her, Leo?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was clear. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah was adjusting her dress in front of a mirror. Her reflection was different, stronger, more confident. She had made a choice, and now it was time to move on. As she picked up her phone, her eyes scanned the screen. Leo's name appeared again. She hesitated. No more waiting. No more wondering. She turned the phone face down, choosing herself for the first time in a long while. The future was hers to shape. Back in the mansion, Leo's frustration grew. Elena stood in front of him, her eyes piercing as she spoke. "You've made a mess of things, Leo. You think you can walk away from me? From our past?" Leo sighed, his grip tightening on the glass of whiskey in his hand. "I made a mistake, Elena. I was blind. But I can't fix it now. Not with you, not with Sarah." Across town, Sarah's life was changing. The job interview had gone well, better than she could have imagined. The new company saw potential in her, real potential. For the first time in forever, she felt like she was moving towards something greater than herself. She walked through the bustling city streets, her head held high. A small smile tugged at her lips as she thought about her future. She didn't need Leo to define her. Leo stood in the study, looking at the contract again. The contract that had brought Sarah into his life, and yet had pushed her away just as quickly. "I can't believe I let her go," he whispered, staring at the words that had changed everything. He turned away from the desk, pacing back and forth. Elena watched him silently, her eyes calculating, waiting for the moment she knew was coming. "You can't have both, Leo," she said. "You never could. Not with me, and certainly not with her." He didn't respond. Later that day, Sarah sat alone in her small apartment, staring out the window at the city skyline. Her phone buzzed again, Leo's name again. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. But then she put it down. She wasn't going to answer. She wasn't going to let him have that control over her anymore. The reflection of the city lights in the glass was beautiful, but it was nothing compared to the freedom she felt. Back in the mansion, Leo stood by the window, staring out at the city. He wanted to reach out to Sarah, to tell her how much he regretted everything. But something in the pit of his stomach told him it was too late. He had pushed her too far. "She won't come back," he whispered to himself. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. It wasn't just about Leo anymore. It was about her. She had a chance to rebuild, to find her own happiness. And for the first time, she didn't need anyone's permission to do it. As she walked into the coffee shop to meet a new client, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Leo. This time, she opened it. "I'm sorry. I can't live with myself knowing I lost you. Please, Sarah, come back." She read the message once, then read it again. The pain in his words was clear, but she couldn't go back to the life she had just walked away from. Not now. Not ever. Leo tried to call again, but Elena intercepted. "You can't fix this, Leo," she said, her voice dripping with finality. "You'll never get her back." Leo turned away from the phone, the reality of his situation sinking in. Elena wasn't wrong. He had lost Sarah, and now she was moving on without him. Sarah smiled to herself as she finished her coffee. She felt at peace. It was strange, she had expected to feel more grief, more regret. But there was none. It was time for Sarah to live her own life. Not Leo's. Not Elena's. As she stepped out of the coffee shop and into the bustling city streets, she knew she had made the right choice. For the first time, she was truly free. What happens when you're forced to choose between the life you know and the future you deserve? Will Leo ever come to terms with what he's lost? Or will Sarah's independence be the thing that keeps her from ever looking back? If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below. Let us know who you think Leo should choose, and stay tuned, because the story is far from over. Leo's steps echoed through the empty hallways of his mansion. His fingers ran along the polished surfaces of his furniture, but his mind was elsewhere, on Sarah. He hadn't seen her in weeks, but it felt like it was just yesterday that he'd let her walk out of his life. The weight of the mistake he'd made weighed on him with every passing minute. He stopped in front of the window, gazing out over the city. It was late, but Leo wasn't sure he could sleep tonight. He picked up his phone, staring at Sarah's last message, but he didn't call. Not this time. She had moved on, and he had no right to drag her back. Sarah stood at the edge of the park, a breeze brushing her hair, her eyes locked on the city skyline. She had found her peace, built a life of her own, and she was no longer haunted by the decisions Leo had made. She had walked away, not out of anger, but because she knew her worth. Her phone buzzed again, another message from him. She hesitated, then silently turned it over and walked forward. She wasn't looking back anymore. She had learned that sometimes, moving forward meant leaving the past behind, even if it was hard. Leo put the phone down and glanced at the wedding ring that had been sitting on his desk for weeks. The same ring that once symbolized a future with Sarah. The same future he'd thrown away in favor of his own insecurities and fears. I messed up, he whispered to himself. He had done everything to protect his wealth, his empire, but in the end, he had lost the one thing that truly mattered. Days passed, and Leo found himself stuck in the same cycle. Loneliness. The occasional visit from Elena was more a reminder of his past mistakes than anything else. The more he saw Elena, the more he realized she wasn't the woman he wanted. She wasn't Sarah. He finally made a decision. Sarah's new life was starting to take shape. She had a new job, a new home, and a future that was all her own. Her strength had come from the hard decision to walk away from everything Leo had promised her. Every day felt like a victory, a reminder that she didn't need anyone to validate her choices. Not Leo. Not anyone. She just finished a meeting when she stepped outside and found herself face to face with Leo. He stood there, his usual confident demeanor replaced by an uncertain vulnerability. She paused but didn't flinch. She had moved on, and she knew this moment wasn't going to pull her back. "I've been trying to reach you, Sarah," Leo said, his voice softer than she expected. She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "And what is it you want now, Leo? To tell me how sorry you are." Leo shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I know I can't fix the past. I can't undo my mistakes. But I'm here, Sarah. To apologize, yes, but also to ask for another chance." Sarah took a long breath, feeling the air fill her lungs. She had wanted this moment, the chance to hear Leo admit what he had done. But now, with the words out in the open, she wasn't sure if she still cared. She had a new life now. A life that didn't involve waiting around for someone to decide she was enough. "You had your chance," she said calmly, staring directly into his eyes. "You made your choice. And I made mine." Leo's face tightened, and for a brief moment, Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. But she didn't flinch. She had learned the hardest lesson. She was enough without him. Leo stood there, defeated. Sarah was right. He had no one to blame but himself. Elena had never been his true love. Sarah was. And now he had lost her for good. Later that night, Leo found himself back at the mansion. He walked through the grand halls, the emptiness overwhelming him. The house that once felt like his kingdom now felt like a prison. He stood at the bar, poured himself a drink, and looked out the window at the city lights. It was too late, he thought. But he couldn't help the overwhelming sense of regret that washed over him. Sarah sat by her window, the lights of the city illuminating her face. She smiled to herself. It was the first real smile she had felt in months. She had moved on, not because she didn't care, but because she cared enough to choose herself. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from a friend, a message of congratulations. She had been promoted at her new job. A small victory, but it felt like everything. She had made it. In life, we all face moments when we have to choose between holding on to what was and embracing what could be. Sarah chose herself. And Leo, finally, understood that some things are lost forever. But in the end, they both found their peace, their own futures, apart but stronger. If you enjoyed this finale, like, comment, and subscribe for more. Let us know what you thought of Sarah and Leo's journey, and stay tuned for more stories you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest changes.